Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega, the dream match millions of people have wanted for years. The expectations were stratospheric, and that was before the possibility that this match could happen actually became a reality. How could a match, even one featuring two of the best wrestlers of the generation, possibly live up to the expectations put on it? I wish I could tell you that. Unfortunately, God did not bless me with the intelligence necessary to understand how two people like Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega can be so good at professional wrestling. Here's what I can do. I can show you the numbers collated by our Pro Wrestling Musings team. These statistics help tell the story of one of the greatest TV matches, maybe one of the greatest wrestling matches in recent memory. And maybe by the end of all this, we can figure out how it's possible that these two wrestling geniuses could have possibly exceeded expectations of one of the most anticipated wrestling matches ever. This is Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson by the numbers. Wrestling is about far more than the numbers, of course, but there's no way to quantify the unbelievable energy of the crowd. All of that is just icing on the cake, though. The numbers can show us why this match would have been an all-timer with or without the 20,000 rabid fans in New York. So we begin with the most basic of wrestling maneuvers, the strike. Punch, slap, or kick, strikes help tell so many stories in the minute-to-minute interactions of a contest. The first thing you need to notice about this match is just how well these two men used their strikes. They certainly didn't use them sparingly, combining for 125 in 30 minutes. But what you notice about them is the degrees of impact they have. They range from fast striking combinations like what we saw in the early stages to Bryan's world famous yes kicks to the absolutely vicious rolling elbows and V-triggers by the end. One thing AEW loves to do is show babyface fire by having them throw long striking combinations. Bryan fits perfectly into this model. It's a big reason why Bryan ended up with 64% of the match offense. More on that later. But this is where we get the first wrinkle of this physical story that makes this match so compelling. While Bryan threw 20 more strikes than Omega, the champ doubled him up in strike downs, any strike that results in a knockdown. This is a crucial story because you don't want to punk out your champion just to build your new babyface. In this case, AEW certainly did not. While Danielson threw brutal-looking striking combinations, Kenny Omega's V-triggers remained the most devastating strikes either man threw in the whole match. Not only did Omega outdo Danielson significantly in terms of strike downs overall, the fact that he did it while throwing fewer overall strikes means that his strike down rate is significantly higher. In a match where these two men were meant to be presented as equals, Omega recorded a strike down once out of every 5 strikes he threw. Danielson recorded a strike down fewer than once out of every 10. This is an AEW story personified. The babyface is active and pushes the pace. The heel is brutally effective and strong. But that's just where our story begins, because this rivalry is based around these two being equal. So if Omega is presented as the more dangerous striker, then Danielson must have the advantage elsewhere. And would you look at this? Danielson blows Omega out of the water with his submissions. This is not surprising, of course, for Danielson, given his raw wrestling ability. What's impressive is how little Danielson allowed Omega to get close to applying a submission hold. Kenny averages 46 seconds of submission per hour. He averaged 16 in this match. He averaged 16 seconds while having an extended heat segment for about 6 minutes in the middle of the match. The story is simple. Kenny Omega, the best wrestler in the world, wants absolutely no part of Bryan Danielson's submission game. Grapples are always an interesting number in our stat database. They can tell so many different stories depending on the match and what the wrestlers want to accomplish. In this case, Omega once again underperformed his normal per hour rate by a significant margin. He averaged 14 grapples an hour in this match compared to 34 normally. But the grapples in this match served a very specific purpose: make the fans forget that they're watching 30 straight minutes of wrestling. However much we want to say about how much we wanted to see this match, it is very easy for fans to get burnt out in a match this long. So for both men, their grapples were extremely well paced, usually after a long striking combination. Omega's Snapdragon on the ramp after a yes kick combo, his Snapdragon off the top rope, or Danielson's reversal into the cowl mutilation were put there to make the fans pop. Grapples are often the most exciting non-signature moves of any match, and these men used them perfectly. They didn't overuse them with just 12 combined in 30 minutes, but each one was memorable and fantastically brutal. Some quick notes about a few of these numbers that all helped contribute to an incredible match. Kenny Omega underperformed his normal pin attempts per hour due to the fact that he gave up so much offense to Danielson. That being said, their identical pin attempts show a tit-for-tat exchange that carried even to their bids to win the match. You can see that their fouls were almost equal, very unusual for a clear babyface heel divide like there was in this match. But this is actually something AEW does that's very unique. They don't necessarily view fouls as strictly for heels and sacrilege for babyfaces. In this case, Danielson's fouls tended to be retaliation for transgressions committed by Omega. What's interesting here is that Omega's foul rate per hour just over a third of his usual 26 average. This is a Kenny Omega special. In matches where he's really tested as a heel, he sometimes fouls less, both as a reflection of how little time he's on offense and because he feels truly pushed and he's not even thinking about fouling, he's just thinking about wrestling. Don Callis also played almost no role in this match, probably a call from him to just stay out of the way while the fans marveled at these two men in the ring. The taunts from Omega, one of the numbers that just jumps off the page. He averages nearly a taunt per minute in this match. For Omega, he can taunt for one of two reasons: to either get in his opponent's head or to psych himself up. He does both in this one, and because Omega is one of the smartest wrestlers in the world today, each taunt tells a story of where he is in the match. You rarely expect a wrestler this far behind in the offense percentage to taunt this much, but this is Omega's MO since turning heel, and clearly it's working. Now, you probably noticed from the very beginning the fact that Omega is actually leading in the big offense category despite being so far behind in offense overall. This is, again, another AEW trick. Big offense is the combined offense for both men without counting simple strikes. AEW wrestlers love to show babyface fire in the form of high-volume striking combinations like we said, but the big offense reflects the real story being told. These are the spots that you remember. The big offense tells the story of who you're meant to believe had the advantage when the match is over. During the match, Bryan gets so many little jabs in that there are plenty of times that you feel like he has the advantage. However, Kenny's more powerful, more impactful offense means that when it's all said and done, he did more impactful damage. What you're meant to take away is that when Danielson falls behind in their eventual rematch, you are supposed to bite on every near fall. Of course, that sounds obvious, but if Danielson dominates the whole match and Omega gets nothing in, why would you bite on a near fall? At the end of the day, Bryan Danielson is a babyface. You're meant to feel sympathetic for him when Kenny has the heat, and that's exactly what big offense is about. We'll end today by talking about the flow of offense chart. For any of you out there who are longtime viewers of Pro Wrestling Musings, you know that I love flow of offense. It's my favorite part of the numbers that we collect. I could do an entire 10-minute video just about this graph, but much like this match, there's actually a very specific story being told through this graph. Professional wrestling is simulated fighting. We suspend our disbelief, but at the end of the day, the best pro wrestling matches don't need you to do it really that much at all. A real fight is not just a physical contest. Just listen to any commentator on a boxing or MMA broadcast. Fighting is about tactical strategy as much as it is about physical power, and a good pro wrestling match is no different. This graph is tactics in a picture. These two react to each other. They say fighting is an art form. We've said pro wrestling is an art form. Well, this is art right here. The two respond to each other, ebbing and flowing across 30 minutes. It's no coincidence that both men's offense fell to 0 at the 20-minute mark, the very point where most non-title AEW matches would have ended. This match was more than just an entertaining TV match. It was a statement from both men. Danielson wants to prove that he's still got it even after years of working on a very specific style. Omega wants to prove that he's still the man who will deliver AEW its most legendary singles match. So at this point, when most wrestlers would call it quits, these guys are just getting started. It may sound dramatic, but this graph charts out their careers in a way. From humble beginnings to meteoric rises to world-renowned tour de forces to now, their triumphant conclusion when two of the best ever finally meet. The only question now is, when the time limit is removed, does Bryan Danielson truly conquer the mountain, or does Kenny Omega continue his reign? One thing's for sure, all eyes in the wrestling world and beyond will be on their rematch.